Single mom texts the billionaire by mistake. He sends a limo and says, "We need to talk about twins." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The night was cold and quiet except for the faint hum of traffic outside a small apartment complex on the outskirts of Chicago. Emma Parker sat at a kitchen table that had long lost its shine, her phone screen glowing softly in the dim light. Two identical cribs stood in the corner, and the gentle sound of her twin daughter's breathing was the only proof of peace in that room. Her checking account showed $2.13. The last can of formula was already watered down. Her fingers trembled as she typed a message meant for her brother James. "I hate to ask again, but I need $40 for formula. I get paid Friday. I promise I will pay you back." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then pressed send before courage could talk her out of it. The message flew across the screen, sealing her small act of desperation. What Emma did not realize was that she had mistyped one digit of James's number. 3 miles away, in a glass tower glowing against the city skyline, Alexander Reed sat in his corner office reviewing a merger document when his phone buzzed. He expected another corporate update, but instead found himself staring at a message filled with quiet despair. He frowned, thinking it was a wrong number, but something about the words, especially the mention of a baby, made him pause. He typed, "I think you have the wrong number." A few seconds later, another message appeared. "Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. Please ignore that. I texted the wrong person." She tossed her phone aside, mortified. Another failure in a long line of them. But Alexander did not move on. He stared at the message, the memory of his younger sister flashing in his mind, the one he had lost years ago when he was too busy building his empire to return her call. Without thinking, he wrote back, "Is your baby going to be all right?" On the other end, Emma froze. Who was this stranger asking about her baby? For a moment, she considered blocking the number, but exhaustion overruled suspicion. "We will manage," she replied curtly. "Sorry to bother you." The response came almost instantly. "I could help. No strings attached." Emma let out a soft laugh that sounded more like disbelief than humor. "Thank you, but I do not take money from strangers," she typed. "Smart policy," came his reply. "I am Alex. Now I am not a stranger. What formula do your twins need?" The name sat on her screen like an unopened door. For a long moment she did not answer. Then, with a sigh of surrender, she typed the brand. A minute later, her phone vibrated again. The notification from her payment app made her eyes widen. He had sent $400. "This is too much," she wrote. His answer came quickly. "Consider it an advance for hope." Tears blurred her vision. She had not cried when she lost her job or when the eviction notice appeared, but this unexpected kindness broke something open inside her. As she whispered, "Thank you," she did not know that the man on the other end of the phone was looking at the reflection of his own past mistake, and that this wrong number had just rewritten both their destinies. The next morning, sunlight crept through the thin curtains of Emma's small apartment, washing the room in pale gold. Her twin daughters were already awake, giggling softly in their cribs, the sound like fragile music in the silence. For the first time in weeks, Emma woke without the crushing weight of fear. On the kitchen counter sat a can of baby formula and a small grocery bag filled with milk, diapers, and fruit. She stared at them as if they might vanish. The night before had felt unreal, like a strange dream. She still did not understand why a stranger named Alex would help her, or how he knew about her daughters. She had read the payment notification at least a dozen times, half expecting it to disappear. It had not. When she checked her messages again, there was another one waiting. "Hope the girls slept better," it said. "Let me know if you need anything." The words were simple, but they lingered in her chest like warmth on a winter morning. Emma typed back slowly, "We are okay. Thank you again. You really did not have to do that," he replied. "Sometimes we help not because we have to, but because someone once helped us." That line replayed in her mind all day. After feeding the twins and dressing them, she bundled them into an old double stroller and headed out to drop off a job application at a small accounting firm downtown. She had been an assistant accountant before the layoffs, and she still carried her worn leather portfolio like a badge of who she used to be. The elevator in the building smelled of coffee and carpet cleaner. The receptionist smiled politely but told her there were no openings yet. Emma thanked her anyway, forcing a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Outside, the sky had turned grey, the wind biting through her thin jacket. She stopped at a small park across from the office and sat on a bench, rocking the stroller with one foot while checking her phone. Another message from Alex waited. "Did you get some rest?" it read. She hesitated before answering. "Trying to. Looking for work again." His next message came faster this time. "What is your field?" She told him about her accounting degree, her last job, the layoffs. Then she added, "I will find something. I always do." There was a long pause before the screen lit again. "If I knew someone looking for part-time help, would you be open to it?" Her heart skipped. She did not want charity, but if it was real work, she could not refuse. "Depends on the job," she typed. "Understood," he wrote. "Let me check something." For the rest of the day, Emma could not shake the feeling that her life had quietly shifted course, like a train switching tracks without warning. When she returned home that evening, tired and windblown, a message was waiting. "Tomorrow afternoon. Dress comfortably. A car will pick you up at 2. It is safe. My driver's name is Daniel." Emma's fingers trembled. She reread the message, heart pounding. "Why? Where are we going?" His reply was short. "I will explain in person. And do not worry. I promise you will not regret it." She stared at the text for a long time, every instinct warning her to be cautious. Yet something in his words, calm, certain, kind, made her want to believe him. She typed, "I have 2 babies. I cannot leave them." His answer came almost instantly. "Then bring them." The next day dawned, crisp and clear. Emma dressed the twins in matching yellow sweaters and packed a diaper bag with careful precision, as if preparing for an exam she did not understand. When the sound of a car engine echoed outside her window, she looked down and froze. A black limousine waited at the curb, gleaming under the morning Sunday. A uniformed driver stepped out and opened the back door. "Miss Parker?" he asked gently. "Mr. Reed sent me." She swallowed hard. Mr. Reed. The name hit her like a small shock. Was that Alex's real name? She locked her door, double-checked the stroller straps, and slowly approached the car. Her neighbors peeked from their doors, whispering as she loaded the twins inside. The leather seats were soft, the interior quiet except for the soft breathing of her daughters. As the limo pulled away, the city blurred past the windows. Emma's reflection stared back at her, tired, anxious, but faintly hopeful. She looked at the twins, their tiny hands resting in her lap, and whispered, "Maybe this is the start of something better." Across the city, in a tall building that glittered like steel and glass, Alexander Reed watched the same limo from his office window through a security feed. For reasons he could not explain, his heartbeat quickened. He turned to his assistant. "Make sure the conference room is ready," he said quietly, "and bring the documents from Human Resources. It is time she knows who she has been talking to." The assistant nodded and left. Alone again, Alexander exhaled slowly. The wrong number that had appeared on his screen 2 nights ago had already become the one thing he could not ignore. The limousine glided smoothly through the heart of the city, passing high-rise buildings and tree-lined streets that seemed to belong to another world. Emma sat rigidly, her hands clasped around her purse, watching the reflections of passing cars ripple across the tinted glass. The twins sat beside her in their car seats, curious eyes darting toward every sound. The driver, Daniel, was polite but quiet, his gaze steady on the road. After 20 minutes, the car slowed before a towering glass structure with polished marble steps and a fountain at its entrance. The sign read Meridian Technologies. Emma's heart skipped. She had seen that name before, in newspapers, on job listings far out of reach. She turned to the driver, uncertain. "There must be a mistake. I cannot possibly have business here." Daniel smiled kindly. "Mr. Reed is expecting you, ma'am." The building's lobby was vast, filled with light from the skylights above. People in suits moved with purpose, their shoes echoing across the marble floor. Emma felt the weight of every stare, conscious of her faded jeans and worn sweater. The twins drew curious glances, but she kept her chin up, pushing the stroller toward the elevator as Daniel guided her. On the 62nd floor, he led her to a pair of glass doors etched with the name Alexander Reed, Chief Executive Officer. Her pulse quickened. "Please go right in," Daniel said gently. The doors closed softly behind her, and the world seemed to still. Alexander stood near the window, the city sprawling behind him like a living painting. In the daylight, he looked younger than she expected, though there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that success could not erase. When he turned, his expression softened. "Emma," he said, as if testing the sound of her name. "Thank you for coming." She blinked, her voice barely a whisper. "You are Alex?" He nodded. "I am sorry for the secrecy. I wanted to meet you in person, but I was not sure you would come if you knew who I was." She stared at him, struggling to connect the kind stranger from the messages with the man standing before her. "You are the CEO of this place," she said slowly. "Why would someone like you care about a wrong number?" He smiled faintly, walking toward her but keeping a respectful distance. "Because sometimes the wrong number leads to the right person." He gestured toward the sofa. "Please, sit. You and the girls have had a long morning." She hesitated before sitting down, adjusting the stroller beside her. The twins looked up at him with wide, unafraid eyes. Alexander crouched slightly to their level. "Hello there," he said softly. "You must be Lily and Noah." Emma froze. "How do you know their names?" she asked quietly. He met her gaze, and for the first time, there was no distance in his tone. "Because your brother James works in my human resources department. When I mentioned the text message, he told me about you. He said you were looking for work and that you were one of the best accountants he had ever known." Relief mixed with embarrassment on her face. "He told you that," she murmured. "He did," Alexander said, "and that is why I asked you here. We need someone to help with a short-term project. It would be remote work, flexible hours, and fair pay." Emma could hardly breathe. "You are offering me a job." "I am offering you an opportunity," he corrected gently. "No pity, no charity. You earn it." Her throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, then at the twins. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. "We could both use a little redemption." She smiled faintly, the first genuine one in days. "All right, I accept." He nodded, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. "Good. My assistant will handle the paperwork. You can start Monday." Emma rose to leave, but before she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Emma," he said softly, "when I sent that money the first night, it was not about guilt or power. It was because I saw someone who reminded me that kindness still matters." She turned, eyes bright with emotion. "You barely know me," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, glancing at the twins, "but sometimes strangers are just family we have not met yet." For a long moment, silence filled the room, heavy but warm. Then Emma nodded and left with the stroller, her heart beating faster than the elevator descending beneath her feet. Behind her, Alexander stood at the window again, watching the street below, unaware that this meeting had only begun to uncover the secret that fate had quietly written for both of them. 2 days later, the first chill of autumn brushed against the Chicago skyline as Emma arrived at Meridian Technologies for her first day of work. She wore a simple navy blouse and gray slacks borrowed from her sister-in-law, her hair tied neatly though a few strands escaped in the wind. The twins were at home with Mrs. Hallie, the retired nurse who lived across the hall and had offered to watch them. Emma's heart still raced as she stepped through the revolving doors, clutching her identification badge like a fragile promise. She had never worked in a place like this before. The lobby gleamed with glass and chrome, and the people moved with the confidence of those who belonged. At the reception desk, a smiling woman directed her to the 23rd floor. When the elevator doors opened, Emma was greeted by the soft hum of computers and quiet conversation. A young assistant named Clara led her to a small but comfortable workspace near the corner office. "Mr. Reed said to make sure you have everything you need," Clara said kindly. "He has a meeting right now, but he will check on you later." Emma thanked her and sat down, taking a deep breath before opening her laptop. The screen filled with rows of financial data and account summaries. It was familiar ground numbers, never judged her. As the hours passed, she lost herself in the work, forgetting her nerves. At noon, she ate a sandwich from her bag while watching the city through the window. The streets far below seemed unreal, a painting of movement and sound. When she finished, she turned to find Alexander standing a few feet away. He was dressed in a dark suit, his sleeves rolled up slightly, the formality softened by a warm smile. "I see you survived your first morning," he said. Emma rose quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. "Mr. Reed, sorry. I mean Alex, yes, it went well. The files are straightforward once you get used to the system." "Good," he said, glancing at her screen. "You caught an error in the vendor report that 3 of my accountants missed last quarter. That is impressive." She felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I just double-check everything." "Old habit." He nodded thoughtfully. "A habit worth keeping." There was a brief silence, not uncomfortable, but filled with something unspoken. He looked at her a moment longer, then said, "Do you mind if I ask something personal?" She hesitated but nodded. "Why did you stop working after the layoffs? You clearly have the skill." She sighed softly. "Childcare. Most companies do not want to deal with someone who has 2 babies and no partner. It is easier to find reasons not to hire me." His expression softened. "For what it is worth, this company does not believe in those reasons." His tone was sincere, and for a moment she saw not the powerful executive, but a man who had once known struggle. Before she could reply, the office door opened, and a woman in a red suit stepped in without knocking. Her heels clicked sharply on the tile. "Alexander, the board is waiting," she said coolly. Then her eyes flicked to Emma. "You must be the new contractor." Emma offered a polite smile, but the woman's gaze was calculating. "I am Melissa," she said. "Chief Financial Officer." Alexander's tone shifted, colder now. "Melissa, this is Emma Parker. She will be assisting with the audit project." Melissa's expression softened slightly, though her voice carried a faint edge. "Welcome, Miss Parker. I hope you understand how rare it is to have Mr. Reed take personal interest in new hires." Emma forced a polite smile. "I am grateful for the opportunity." When the door closed behind them, she exhaled shakily. The encounter left her uneasy. Still, as she gathered her things at the end of the day, a quiet satisfaction filled her. She had worked hard, earned praise, and for the first time in months, felt capable again. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed with a new message from Alex. "You did well today. The twins would be proud." She stared at the words, a faint smile forming as the elevator descended. In another part of the building, Alexander stood at his office window, watching the city lights flicker to life. For reasons he could not yet name, helping Emma felt like something more than kindness. It felt like atonement. And though neither of them knew it yet, the connection that had begun with a single wrong text was about to reveal a truth far greater than either of them expected. By the end of her first week, Emma had begun to settle into a quiet rhythm. Each morning she dropped the twins off with Mrs. Hallie, who had grown fond of their curious laughter, and then she rode the bus downtown to Meridian Technologies. Her cubicle overlooked the river, and though her job was temporary, she treated every task as if it might decide her future. What surprised her most was how often Alexander stopped by her desk. Sometimes it was to review data or clarify numbers, but other times it was just to ask how her day was going. He never lingered long, yet every exchange carried a warmth that unsettled her in ways she could not name. On Friday afternoon, he invited her to lunch in the company cafe. The space was sleek but quiet, filled with the aroma of roasted coffee and baked bread. They sat by the window, the city stretching endlessly below. "You have made quite an impression," Alexander said, stirring his coffee. "Melissa has already asked if I am planning to recruit you permanently." Emma smiled faintly. "I think she still doubts I belong here." He nodded. "Melissa doubts everyone until they prove her wrong." His eyes softened. "You have already done that." She looked down, embarrassed. "Thank you, but I am just grateful to work again. It means I can give the girls more stability." His expression changed at the mention of the twins, something almost protective flashing in his gaze. "They are lucky to have you," he said quietly. For a moment neither spoke, and the silence carried more truth than words. Then her phone buzzed. A picture from Mrs. Hallie appeared on the screen, 2 little girls sitting on the living room rug, surrounded by coloring books. Alexander caught the photo's reflection and smiled. "They really are identical," he said. "Completely," Emma replied. "Sometimes even I mix them up." She laughed softly, then noticed how intently he was studying the picture. "What is it?" she asked. He blinked and looked away. "Nothing, just something familiar." Before she could ask, Melissa approached their table, carrying a folder. "Alexander, we need a moment," she said crisply, though her gaze lingered on Emma. "Of course," he said, rising. "Emma, thank you for lunch." After he left, Melissa's tone cooled. You seem competent, Miss Parker, but a word of advice: Mr. Reed has a reputation to protect. I would keep things professional. Emma met her eyes calmly. That is exactly what I intend to do. Melissa gave a tight smile and walked off, her heels clicking sharply across the tile. The remark stung, but Emma refused to let it shake her. She finished her coffee and returned to work, determined to prove herself through results, not gossip. That evening, as she packed her things, a message appeared on her phone. "I hope Melissa was not too hard on you," it read. She smiled despite herself. "I can handle it," she replied. "Good," he wrote back, "because I have something to show you on Monday. It concerns the project and maybe something more personal." Her curiosity flared, but before she could ask, he added, "You will understand when you see it." The weekend passed quietly until Sunday afternoon, when Mrs. Halley mentioned a letter that had arrived in the mail. Emma opened it at the kitchen table, her heart quickening as she recognized the company seal. Inside was an invitation, written in elegant print: "Private Charity Gala, hosted by Meridian Technologies, honoring family initiatives and community care." At the bottom, in neat handwriting, was a note: "I would like you to attend as my guest. Bring no worries, just your smile. A. Reed." She set the letter down, her breath unsteady. She had no dress suitable for such an event, no sense of why a man like him would want her there. Yet something deep inside whispered that this was not just about charity. It was about connection, about something neither of them yet dared to name. Across the city, Alexander folded another copy of the same invitation and stared at it for a long time before slipping it into a file labeled Family Foundation. On his desk was an old photograph, his younger brother, smiling beside a woman with Emma's same eyes. The resemblance was undeniable. As the city lights flickered on, Alexander's decision solidified. Monday would bring answers, but it would also bring the truth he had both hoped for and feared, that Emma's twins were more connected to his past than either of them yet realized. Monday arrived grey and heavy with rain. Emma woke early, her nerves tangled with anticipation. She dressed the twins, prepared their breakfast, and left them with Mrs. Halley before catching the bus downtown. The invitation to the charity gala sat folded neatly in her purse, its elegant lettering a reminder of how strange her life had become. A few weeks ago, she had been counting coins for baby formula. Now she worked for one of the most powerful companies in the city and had been personally invited by its CEO to an event attended by the city's elite. She could not decide whether it felt like fate or a test. When she arrived at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with quiet urgency. Staff hurried through hallways carrying floral arrangements and boxes of decorations for the evening's event. Clara greeted her at the elevator with a bright smile. "Mr. Reed asked me to remind you about tonight," she said. "He said the car will pick you up at 6. Emma blinked. "Car? Of course," Clara said, as if it were obvious. "It is a formal event. He wants you to arrive safely." Emma thanked her and hurried to her desk, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease. The workday passed slowly, each hour stretching beneath the weight of her thoughts. By late afternoon, she decided to stop by a small boutique near the office, where the owner, a kind woman named Lucia, helped her find a simple navy gown that fit perfectly after a few quick adjustments. As Emma stood in front of the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The dress was elegant but modest, the kind of thing she had once imagined wearing in another lifetime. At exactly 6 o'clock, the familiar black limousine pulled up outside her building. Daniel greeted her with a polite nod, and soon they were gliding through the evening traffic toward the downtown hotel where the gala was being held. The streets shimmered with reflections of streetlights on wet pavement. When the car stopped before the grand entrance, Emma's breath caught. The lobby was filled with music, laughter, and the soft glow of chandeliers. Alexander was waiting near the entrance, wearing a black suit and a quiet smile. "You look perfect," he said as she stepped out. His words were simple but carried an unexpected warmth that made her pulse quicken. "I have never been to anything like this," she admitted. "Just stay close," he said gently. "You will be fine." Inside, the room buzzed with conversation. Waiters carried trays of champagne, and a jazz band played softly in the corner. Alexander introduced her to several executives and donors, each more polished than the last. Some greeted her kindly, others gave her polite but puzzled looks, as if questioning what she was doing there. Melissa appeared halfway through the evening, her red dress gleaming under the chandeliers. "Emma," she said with a practiced smile. I see you took my advice about keeping things professional. The tone was sweet but laced with warning. Alexander, overhearing, turned smoothly. Melissa, perhaps you should check on the auction items, he said evenly. Melissa hesitated, then nodded curtly and walked away. Emma exhaled softly. She does not like me very much. She likes control, Alexander replied, and you remind her that some things cannot be controlled. He guided her toward a quieter area near the stage, where photographs of families and children, supported by the company's foundation, were displayed. One photo made him stop. It was of a hospital ward, taken years ago, showing a volunteer group that included his younger brother, Adam. Emma studied the picture, unaware that her breath had caught for a different reason. Standing beside Adam in the photo was a woman with familiar eyes and hair the same shade as hers. "That picture," she whispered. "Where was it taken?" "St. Andrew's Children's Hospital," Alexander said quietly. "Adam volunteered there before he passed away." Emma's voice trembled. "I used to volunteer there too, years ago, before I got married." She pointed to the photo. "That is me." Alexander turned sharply, disbelief flooding his face. "You knew my brother?" For a moment the sounds of the gala faded into silence. She looked at him, her eyes wide and full of realization. "I did not just know him," she said softly. "He was the reason I started believing people like you could be kind." The music swelled again, but nothing felt the same. The connection between them, once built on accident, had just uncovered a thread that ran deeper than either of them had ever imagined. For a long moment, Alexander could not speak. The noise of the gala faded into a dull hum as his mind tried to connect the impossible pieces. Emma's words echoed like a whisper from another lifetime. "You knew my brother," he repeated quietly. She nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "Adam was one of the first people who ever believed in me. I volunteered at the hospital when I was 22. He was organizing a fundraiser for the children's ward, and I helped with the accounting. He was kind, always smiling, but he never talked much about his family. I did not even know he had a brother." Alexander's throat tightened. He had not heard Adam's name spoken aloud in years. "He was my younger brother," he said softly. "He died in a car accident 6 years ago. I thought I had lost every connection to him, but now—" His voice trailed off, heavy with emotion. Emma looked down, her eyes glistening. "I am so sorry, Alex. He changed my life. When my mother got sick, he helped me pay for her medicine even though I never asked. He told me, 'Kindness does not need permission.' I never forgot that." Alexander took a step closer, his voice low. "He used to say that to me too when we were boys." For a moment, neither spoke. The truth hung between them like fragile glass, too sacred to break. Then, as the music shifted to a slower tempo, Alexander gestured toward the exit. "Let us get some air." Outside, the city lights shimmered on wet pavement, reflections dancing in puddles like tiny galaxies. They stood beneath the awning as light rain began to fall. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. "It feels strange," she said quietly, "like the world just folded in on itself." Alexander nodded. "Maybe it is not strange. Maybe it is how things were meant to be. My brother always believed that people cross paths for a reason." She smiled faintly. "I used to believe that too, but life taught me that sometimes fate is just a name we give to coincidence." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw in her eyes the same strength that had once drawn people to Adam. "Maybe so," he said, "but sometimes coincidence feels too precise to ignore." They stood in silence as a valet rushed past holding an umbrella. In that quiet, something unspoken settled between them, an understanding that defied explanation. Alexander finally broke the silence. "There is something else I have been meaning to ask," he said carefully. "The twins. Their father, was he around when you volunteered at the hospital?" She hesitated, sensing where the question was leading. "No," she said finally. "I met their father later. It was not a good marriage. He left before they were born." Alexander nodded, though his thoughts were racing. He remembered how Adam had once confided in him about a woman he cared for deeply, someone he met through his volunteer work. He had never mentioned her name, only that she was brave and kind, and did not see him for his family's money. Now the memory burned brighter than ever. "What was Adam like when you knew him?" Emma asked, her voice soft. Alexander smiled faintly. "He was the best of us, reckless, but always guided by his heart. He wanted to build something that mattered." Her eyes softened. "He did. You are still helping children because of him." He exhaled, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "You sound like him when you say things like that." She looked away, her cheeks warming. "Maybe that is why I liked him so much." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and her face flushed. "I mean, he was kind to everyone." Alexander gave a small, understanding smile. "I know what you meant." Just then, a gust of wind blew through, sending rain across the pavement. He took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders without thinking. "You will catch a cold." She looked up at him, startled by the simple gesture. "You did not have to. Maybe kindness does not need permission," he said softly. The words made her heart skip. For a second, she could almost see Adam's smile in his brother's face. As they stood beneath the flickering lights of the hotel awning, Emma realized that this meeting, this strange, impossible crossing of lives, was not about chance anymore. It was about something unfinished finding its way home. The following morning, the sky over Chicago was pale and heavy with clouds, the kind that promised more rain. Emma woke early, still feeling the echo of last night's conversation. Her thoughts kept circling around the photograph, around Adam, and around the way Alexander had looked at her as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that had haunted him for years. After dressing the twins and leaving them with Mrs. Halley, she rode the bus to Meridian Technologies. The city passed by in a blur of grey streets and coffee shops opening for the morning rush. When she reached the office, she found a note on her desk written in neat handwriting. "Come to the rooftop garden when you arrive. A.R." Her pulse quickened as she took the elevator up. The rooftop was quiet, the air cool and smelling faintly of wet grass. Alexander stood near the railing, his jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a man who looked like he had not slept. When he turned and saw her, he offered a faint smile. "Thank you for coming." She approached slowly. "You said you wanted to talk." He nodded, hesitating as if choosing his words with care. "After the gala, I could not stop thinking about what you said about Adam. There is something I never told anyone outside my family. The night before he died, he called me. He said he had met someone who reminded him what life was about. He said she was the kindest person he had ever known. He wanted me to meet her." Emma froze, her breath catching. "He called you that night?" Alexander nodded. "I was in London on business. I told him we would talk when I got back. That was the last time I ever heard his voice." For a moment, the weight of what was unspoken hung between them like fog. Emma's voice trembled. "I wish I had known. Maybe if I had stayed in touch, maybe." He shook his head gently. "Do not blame yourself. My brother lived his life by his heart. He would not want you to carry his guilt." She nodded, tears glimmering but unshed. "I still have something from him," she whispered. "A letter. He left it at the hospital reception for me the week before the accident. I never opened it. I was afraid of what it might say." Alexander's gaze softened. "Do you still have it?" "Yes," she said quietly. "It is in a box at home. I could bring it to you." "Only if you want to," he said. "It is yours. But I would like to know what my brother wanted to tell you." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind tugging gently at their hair. Then Alexander turned toward her, his tone shifting from personal to professional. "There is something else. The foundation we run in Adam's name is expanding. We are opening a new outreach program for single mothers and children. I want you to oversee the financial structure." Her eyes widened. "Me? That is too much." "It is exactly right," he said. "You have lived what we are trying to change. You understand both the struggle and the strength." She looked away, her throat tightening. "I do not know if I am ready for that kind of responsibility." "You are," he said firmly, "and I will be there to make sure you are not alone." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For the first time since her husband left, she felt like someone was standing beside her, not out of pity, but belief. "All right," she said softly. "I will do it." He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Good. Then let us make something good out of what was lost." As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Emma, may I ask you one last thing?" She looked back. "Of course." His expression was unreadable, but his voice was gentle. "The twins, how old are they exactly?" 3 years old, she said. "They were born in late March." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as if processing a thought he did not want to say aloud. "Thank you," he murmured. As she walked away, unaware of the storm she had just set off inside him, Alexander pulled out his phone and opened an old digital folder labeled Adam's Personal Files. Inside was a medical record dated 3.5 years ago from St. Andrew's Hospital. The words blurred before his eyes. but one line stood out in cruel clarity. Patient's fiancé, expecting twins. Estimated due date, March. His heart pounded, and for the first time since that night 6 years ago, Alexander realized that fate might not have brought Emma into his life by accident. It might have been Adam's final wish. Alexander barely slept that night. The image of Adam's medical record burned in his mind, every line echoing with questions he was not ready to answer. Could it be possible? The dates aligned too perfectly, the details too precise. He sat at his desk long after midnight, staring at the photo Emma had sent of her twins, their identical faces, their wide eyes, and the faint dimple on the left cheek that was unmistakably his brother's. It was not proof, but it felt like destiny whispering through the years. The next morning, he arrived at the office early, his expression composed but distant. When Emma walked in a few hours later, she noticed it instantly. He greeted her with a polite smile, but there was a shadow behind it. "Good morning," she said carefully. "Did you get any rest?" "A little," he replied. "There is something I need to discuss, but not here. Could you meet me this evening at the Foundation's new site?" She hesitated but nodded. Of course. The day passed slowly, tension humming beneath the surface. By sunset, she arrived at the address he had given her, a converted brick building near the edge of the river, still under renovation. The walls smelled faintly of paint, and sunlight filtered through tall windows that overlooked the water. Alexander stood near a table covered in blueprints and donation records. He looked tired, like someone carrying a truth too heavy to share. "It is beautiful," Emma said softly, walking closer. "Adam would have loved this." He nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "He would have," he said. Then he turned toward her. "Emma, there is something I need to ask, and I need you to be completely honest." Her heart skipped. "All right." He took a breath, his voice low and steady. "The twins. Are you absolutely sure their father was the man you told me about?" Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Of course I am sure. Why would you ask that?" He hesitated, then handed her a thin folder. Inside was the old hospital record. Her eyes scanned the page, her pulse quickening as she recognized Adam's name. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "It was in my brother's files," he said. He was engaged. His fiancée was expecting twins due in late March, the same month your daughters were born. The color drained from her face. "That cannot be," she said weakly. "I did not even know he was engaged." "He never told you?" Alexander asked gently. She shook her head, clutching the folder. "No, we were friends. We cared about each other. But he never said anything about that. I left the hospital job after my mother's funeral. I lost contact with everyone. When I found out I was pregnant months later, I thought it had to be." She stopped herself, realizing the timeline she had built might not be as certain as she thought. Alexander stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, I need to know the truth. Were Adam and you close?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He was my friend," she said shakily. "But there was one night, right before he left for that trip. We had both volunteered late. He was upset about his family, and I was broken from losing my mother. It just happened. I did not think it mattered. Then he stopped returning my messages. I thought he had moved on." Alexander's breath caught. The pieces clicked together with cruel precision. He turned away, trying to steady himself. "You never knew," he said softly. "No," she whispered. "I had no idea." The room fell silent except for the soft creak of the building settling in the wind. Emma clutched the folder to her chest, her tears falling quietly. "The twins are his, aren't they?" she asked. Alexander turned, his eyes filled with both sorrow and wonder. "Yes," he said finally. "I believe they are." For a long time they said nothing, two lives standing in the shadow of a man who had once connected them both. Finally, Alexander spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "He would have wanted me to find you, to make sure you were taken care of." She shook her head fiercely. "I do not need to be taken care of. I just want the truth. I want my daughters to know who their father was." He nodded slowly, the weight of the moment settling on him. "Then that is exactly what we will give them." Outside, the river shimmered under the fading light, as if the world itself was exhaling. In that quiet building, something long buried had come back to life, not a secret meant to destroy, but one meant to heal. The discovery changed everything, yet neither of them spoke of it to anyone. The following days at Meridian Technologies moved with quiet tension, as if the entire world had tilted slightly off its axis. Emma continued her work at the foundation, but every time she looked at Alexander, she saw not the powerful CEO who had offered her a chance at redemption, but the brother of the man she had loved, without realizing how deep that bond truly ran. Alexander, meanwhile, struggled to balance truth with compassion. He had spent years building walls around his heart, and now those walls trembled with every glance she gave him. He wanted to protect her, but he also wanted to protect Adam's memory. One afternoon, while reviewing project files together, Emma finally spoke. "Have you told anyone?" she asked quietly. "About the twins?" Alexander shook his head. "Not yet. It is not my story to tell. It is yours." Her eyes softened, grateful but weary. "I am not sure what to do. They deserve to know who their father was. But how do I explain that to them when they are still so little?" He leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "You tell them the truth when they are ready. You tell them that their father was kind, brave, and loved helping people. That is what matters." She nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." Then her voice wavered. "I do not even have a single photo of him. I tried to find something online once, but I could not." Without a word, Alexander opened his drawer and took out a small leather wallet. Inside was an old photograph, faded at the edges, showing two brothers standing side by side in front of a lake. Adam was smiling at the camera, his arm thrown around Alexander's shoulders. "This was taken the summer before he passed," Alexander said softly. Emma reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the picture as tears filled her eyes. "That is how I remember him, always smiling, like the world could not touch him. He was like that," Alexander murmured, "until he lost someone he cared about." She looked up, startled. "You mean?" He nodded slowly. "You," her breath caught. "He told you about me?" "Not by name, but he said he met someone who reminded him what love was supposed to feel like. He said she made him believe people were good again." Her tears spilled over. "I never knew," she whispered. "If I had known, I would have—" "You would have what?" he asked gently. "Tried to stop him from going on that trip. You could not have known, Emma. None of us could." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice breaking. "I just hate that he never met them, that he never got to see his daughter's smile." Alexander reached across the desk and took her hand, his touch steady. "Maybe he does. Maybe he sees them through you." She stared at him, searching his eyes, and for a moment she saw Adam's warmth there too. The silence that followed was not heavy but tender, like two souls remembering someone who had shaped them both. Just then, the office door opened, and Melissa stepped in, her sharp eyes narrowing when she saw their joined hands. "Am I interrupting something?" she asked coolly. Alexander withdrew his hand, but his tone stayed calm. "We were discussing the foundation project." "Of course you were," Melissa said, her voice carrying a hint of accusation. She set a folder on his desk. "The board meeting is at 3. Try not to be late." When she left, Emma exhaled shakily. "She thinks there is something going on between us." Alexander gave a tired smile. "Let her think what she wants. The truth is complicated enough." That evening, as Emma packed her things, she caught her reflection in the darkened office window. Behind her, Alexander stood looking at the same skyline his brother had once loved. The city lights shimmered, and for the first time since learning the truth, she felt something close to peace. Fate had taken much from them both, but it had also returned something: the chance to honor a man who had believed in kindness, and to raise the two little lives who carried his light forward. As she left the building, she whispered to herself, "Adam, they will know you, I promise." And somewhere deep inside her heart, she could almost hear his answer, carried on the wind that brushed softly through the streets below. The following week brought a quiet shift that neither Emma nor Alexander could fully explain. Their conversations grew softer, their silences heavier, and every shared glance seemed to carry the weight of what they now knew. At the office, they worked side by side on the foundation's proposal, late evenings filled with the hum of computers and the faint rustle of papers. Yet beneath the calm surface, both were navigating an ocean of emotions: grief, guilt, gratitude, and something new neither dared to name. One night, after the rest of the building had emptied, Emma stood by the window overlooking the city. The lights shimmered like scattered stars across the river. "He would have loved this view," she said quietly. Alexander looked up from his laptop, watching the reflection of her face against the glass. "He did." Adam always said the city looked kinder at night, as if everyone's mistakes disappeared with the daylight. She smiled faintly. He said that to me too. Alexander's expression softened, and for a moment, the space between them felt almost sacred. Emma, he began, his voice low, I know I cannot replace what you lost, but I want you to know that I will always be here for you and the girls. They are my family now too. She turned to face him, her eyes wide and unsure. You have already done more than enough. I do not want to burden you with my life. It is not a burden, he said. It feels like something I was meant to do. His words hung in the air, heavy, but sincere. Before either could say more, Emma's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and frowned. It was a message from Melissa. Meet me in the lobby. We need to talk. Alone. Emma hesitated but excused herself, promising to return soon. When she reached the lobby, Melissa was waiting near the entrance, arms crossed, a thin smile on her face. You have a talent for finding your way into powerful circles, Melissa said smoothly. First a contract job, then private lunches, and now late-night meetings. Impressive. Emma's heart sank. Whatever you are implying, you are wrong. Am I? Melissa tilted her head. You really think I do not know what is going on? The board is already talking. They think Mr. Reed is distracted. You are becoming a problem. I am just doing my job, Emma said evenly, though her voice trembled. Then maybe you should stick to that, Melissa replied coldly, because if you are not careful, you will lose more than your job. With that, she turned and walked away, her heels echoing like a verdict across the marble floor. Emma stood frozen, her chest tight. She knew Melissa's warning was more than jealousy, it was a threat. When she returned upstairs, Alexander noticed the tension in her face. What happened? He asked immediately. She shook her head. Nothing important, just work politics. He studied her for a moment but did not push. You should not have to deal with that, he said finally. Melissa can be ruthless. I will handle it. No, Emma said quickly. Please do not. I can take care of myself. He sighed but nodded. All right, but if she crosses the line again, you come to me. She agreed quietly, though inside, she knew this was only the beginning. Later that night, back in her apartment, she checked on the twins sleeping soundly in their cribs. Their tiny hands rested peacefully, unaware of the storm swirling around them. She sat beside them, whispering, You have family now, little ones. Maybe not in the way I expected, but someone up there is still looking out for us. Across the city, Alexander stood alone in his penthouse office, the same photograph of Adam beside a glass of untouched whiskey. He whispered to it, I found her, Adam, and I found them. I swear I will protect them the way I should have protected you. His reflection stared back at him from the window, tired and resolute. The rain began again outside, gentle and endless, as if the heavens themselves were promising a quiet redemption for them all. Days passed, but Melissa's warning lingered like a shadow in the back of Emma's mind. She tried to ignore it, throwing herself into work and focusing on the foundation's outreach plans. Yet every time she walked through the building, she could feel whispers behind her, fleeting glances that stung like cold rain. The board had begun to notice the connection between her and Alexander, and gossip spread faster than truth ever could. Alexander, unaware of the full extent of it, kept pushing forward, determined to launch the foundation by the end of the month. He spent more and more time in Emma's office, their collaboration drawing them closer in ways neither had intended. One evening, as they finalized the proposal, he leaned over her desk, pointing to a section of numbers. This projection is strong, he said. It shows exactly how much potential this program has. Emma smiled, though her heart was heavy. It will help a lot of people. That is what Adam would have wanted. He looked at her then, his expression softening. That is what I want too. The air grew still between them. For a moment, it felt like time had paused. But before anything could be said, the office door opened and a voice broke the silence. I am sorry to interrupt. Melissa stood there holding a folder and a smile that did not reach her eyes. The board has called an emergency session tomorrow morning, she said. It concerns a potential conflict of interest regarding the foundation's management. Alexander's jaw tightened. What kind of conflict? Melissa handed him a letter. They have received an anonymous report suggesting that personal relationships may be influencing professional decisions, specifically the appointment of Miss Parker. Emma's stomach dropped. That is not true. she said quietly. "You know how hard I have worked for this." Melissa shrugged. "The board just wants transparency. I am sure it will all be cleared up." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels echoing like a gavel. Alexander tore open the letter, scanning its contents. His face darkened. "This is absurd. They think I hired you because of some personal involvement." Emma's voice trembled. "They will not believe us if we deny it. They already made up their minds." "Then I will make them see reason," he said firmly. "I will protect you." "No," she said quickly. "You cannot. If you defend me, they will think you are hiding something. I will resign. That will solve it." "You will do no such thing," he said sharply, standing. "You have earned your place here, Emma. I will not let anyone take that from you." She looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and sorrow. "You do not understand. If this goes public, the foundation will suffer. Everything we built in Adam's name will be questioned." He hesitated, his anger dissolving into quiet pain. "You are right," he said finally, "but losing you from this project feels like losing him all over again." Her throat tightened, but she forced a small smile. "You will not lose him. He is still here, in what you do, in what we have created. Maybe that is enough." The next morning she arrived early, carrying a resignation letter folded neatly in her bag. The boardroom was filled with murmurs as members took their seats. Melissa sat near the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Alexander entered moments later, his face calm but his eyes fierce. When the meeting began, he stood and spoke with measured authority. "Emma Parker's appointment was based on merit, not favoritism," he said. "Her work speaks for itself. If anyone believes otherwise, they can review the numbers. But understand this, if her position is questioned, then I stand with her. Because the foundation we are building is not about power or appearances. It is about people like her, and people like my brother who believed kindness changes lives." The room fell silent. Even Melissa's confidence faltered for a moment. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she stayed silent. The decision was postponed, but the message was clear. Truth had been spoken. Later that night, as she stood outside under the fading light, she realized that no matter what happened next, she had found something stronger than approval or reputation. She had found courage, and in Alexander's steady defense, she saw something else too, not power, but loyalty born from love, quiet and steadfast like the promise of dawn after a long storm. Weeks passed, and the storm that had threatened to tear everything apart finally began to fade. The board had conducted their review and found no evidence of misconduct. Though whispers still lingered, the truth had held firm, and the Foundation's work continued stronger than ever. The public launch of the Adam Reed Foundation was set for a bright Saturday morning in early spring. The day carried the promise of renewal, the kind that only comes after surviving a long winter. Emma arrived early with the twins, their small hands clutching hers as they stared at the sea of flowers and white tents set up along the riverside. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. Alexander stood on the stage, speaking with volunteers, his dark suit sharp against the pale blue sky. When he saw them, his face softened. He bent down to greet the girls, his tone playful. "Are you ready to be my helpers today?" The twins nodded eagerly, their laughter like sunlight breaking through clouds. Emma smiled, grateful for the warmth that now filled her life, the kind of peace she once thought she would never know. As the event began, speeches were made, stories shared, and tears quietly shed. When it was Alexander's turn, the crowd grew still. He stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The Adam Reed Foundation began with loss," he said. "But today it stands for life, for second chances, for kindness that outlives tragedy. My brother believed that every act of compassion leaves a mark. I see that truth in this foundation, in the people we help, and in the family we build through love." His gaze found Emma in the audience, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to fall silent. "This project would not exist without those who reminded me what kindness truly means," he said. "They turned grief into purpose and strangers into family. That is what Adam believed in, and that is what we continue today." When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Emma felt her throat tighten, not from sadness but from pride. After the ceremony, Alexander walked down from the stage and joined her by the river. The twins ran ahead, chasing bubbles blown by volunteers, their laughter echoing across the water. "He would have been proud," Emma said softly. Alexander nodded. "He would have been proud of you," he replied. She looked up at him, the sunlight catching in her hair. "You kept your promise," she said. "You protected us. You made it easy," he said with a quiet smile. They stood together in silence, watching the twins play, their reflections shimmering on the surface of the river. The moment felt complete, like the closing of a circle that had taken years to find its end. Emma turned to him. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if that message had not been sent by mistake?" He chuckled softly. "All the time. But maybe it was not a mistake at all. Maybe fate just used the wrong number to send the right people to each other." She smiled, tears glimmering but gentle. "I like that version." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold. The twins ran back and wrapped their tiny arms around both of them, one on each side, their giggles soft against the hum of the crowd. Alexander looked down at them, then at Emma, and said, "He would have wanted this, a life filled with love, not regret." "And you?" she asked quietly. "What do you want?" He hesitated only a second before answering. "Exactly this." As the river sparkled in the last light of day, Emma realized that the story she once thought was built on mistakes had always been guided by something greater. Not coincidence, not luck, but love steady, patient, and powerful enough to heal what time could not. And somewhere in the soft wind that passed through the blooming trees, it almost felt like Adam's voice whispering a final truth. Kindness never dies. It just finds new hearts to live in. In this emotional and cinematic journey of love, redemption, and fate, a struggling single mother accidentally texts a billionaire and discovers a connection that changes everything. Through loss, kindness, and quiet courage, their intertwined paths reveal that true wealth lies not in power but in compassion. Inspired by heartfelt millionaire stories, this tale captures the magic of second chances and the beauty of healing through humanity. From whispered secrets to life-altering truths, every scene unfolds like a reflection of destiny, echoing the spirit found in the best millionaire stories across the world. Audiences will feel the warmth of forgiveness and the strength of love that defines modern millionaire stories, reminding us that fate often works through unexpected mistakes, filled with cinematic detail, emotional realism, and timeless lessons about hope. This is one of those rare millionaire stories that stays with you long after it ends. As hearts mend and lives intertwine, the narrative stands as a testament to how kindness and redemption can rewrite even the most painful past, turning ordinary moments into extraordinary millionaire stories.